Renee Viellaris, National Political Editor for the Courier-Mail, joins me now. We'll put coal to one side because I know it's an important job creator and revenue earner for Queensland. Let's start with the Tim Flannery revelations today. It was no mistake, and we've talked about it here on the show, that this coalition of fire chiefs, I might add from places like the ACT, where they're highly political anyway, were out there calling on the Prime Minister, linking bushfires with climate change. Notwithstanding the fact today we hear that there's almost a dozen people to be charged with arson in and around New South Wales only. There'll be others in other states. What did you make of this revelation that Flannery is behind a whole movement to activate the linkage between bushfires and climate change?
Well, Tim Flannery, has the right, I guess, to do that. He is also a private citizen. I accept climate science. The problem here is, let's take all the emotion out of the debate. Even if Australia shut down all its coal-fired generators today, next year we would still have a fire season. No matter what Australia does, will not impact on majorly on the global emissions of the world. The other thing too is, when it comes to this issue about coal, and going back to Anthony Albanese's comments about renewables are cheaper and the way to go, that does not help aluminium factories in Queensland. They cannot operate with solar panels. It just can't happen. It needs to be on all the time. If we have cloudy days, if we have a cyclone, it's not going to work. So we used to have a term back when the CPRS was floating around called carbon leakage, where businesses would go overseas if they were taxed too much. If we force upon renewables on industries, they too will go overseas. They will go overseas because it's too expensive to stay in Australia and because they don't have the reliability that they need. And that is a massive issue that people like Tim Flannery have to accept because it's truthful.
Yeah. Let's talk about climate science and facts. I believe in fact-based assessments, and I don't necessarily believe that climate science, call it as it is, climate science in hypotheses, is always fact-based. Often I think it's a lot of emotion and political activism, and the fact is Australia is a high-wage economy in an area that's very competitive for low wages. So one of the things that kept businesses, particularly multinationals in Australia, was what they lost out with labour market costs. They would pick up with the reliability of our energy sector and the price of energy here. So that's why we've had large industries, the value-added manufacturing sector. We've had very energy-intensive, hungry businesses like aluminium smelting. That is all at risk because of the unreliability of our power, as you've said, but also the price of our power. We will still make aluminium in the world. They will just make it in India or in China using our coal, but the jobs and the revenues and the profits will stay there. That's the thing, that's the reality, I think, that's missing constantly from this debate. And you're right, if we signed up to doubling our Paris agreements, if we shut down every single coal-fired power generator in this country, we will still have bushfires because we will still have arson, and sadly, yes, we'll sadly have arson, but we'll still also have lightning strikes, and unless we get mugged by the reality of cleaning out the greens from local councils, we'll still have this fatwa against hazard reduction burns. So this is the conversation, sensible conversation, surely, Renee, we should be having in this country at the moment.
That's right, and it has got this religious fervour to it. I mean, the issue is that if you don't believe in climate, and some people don't, climate science, and some people don't. But the issue is the mechanism. The issue is always about the mechanism because it's always about taking something away from someone. There's always winners and losers in this debate, and Australia is a high energy using country. If you think about our pillars that drive our economy, it's resources, it's transport, it's tourism, it's agriculture. It's all fair and well for New Zealand to say, well, we're going to go green, but they haven't included agriculture in their targets. So I think, we need to have a conversation about what economy we want to have. And sure, if we want to transition to renewable jobs, then you're taking a $60,000 pay cut. I mean, they're high-paying jobs.
And I also make the point too, irrigation in Australia is energy intensive. It's not so in the case of New Zealand because they've got more available water and they've obviously got a much smaller geography. But for Australia, moving water around is one of the challenges that we have. If we want the standard of living we've got, if we want pensions available as we do, if we want, as we have, a very well-funded PBS, we want kids to be educated, we want basically free university, but for a little bit that we all pay with HECS. If we want all of these things, Australia, we've got to be able to pay for it. And we keep taking in more and more people for the Ponzi scheme of our growth numbers. We saw that with MyEFO. It comes down to participation, productivity and population. Well, the first two we don't do enough on, and we crank it up with population. This is the challenge. Where will Australia be in the next 20 or 30 years if we don't grapple with energy?
Well, we will be going backwards, there's no doubt. And the other thing too about climate is it's a global atmosphere. So it doesn't matter where you burn your coal. For example, we have in Queensland very good thermal coal here. If we don't export it, China or India will get it from Indonesia. Their coal isn't as good. So it'll be worse. It's a worse environmental outcome if we don't export our coal. People hate hearing that, but it's the truth. And I think Australia needs to do more to explain that and explain why it is actually a better environmental outcome for us to send our coal to India. It's very important. And the other point too is there is geopolitical factors at play. If we stop, for example, exporting met coal, that becomes a massive issue in terms of those developing countries that are trying to develop. They need our met coal to develop. So us putting the handbrake on those things creates instability in parts of the world that are very close to us.